Tonight I am reviewing the movie Vesper, another low budget sci-fi movie that kind of came in under the radar and uh, probably deserves a good look-see for anyone who might be interested in some good sci-fi. Very good looking world. I guess it was shot, I believe, in Lithuania, one of the Baltic states, and they have some ancient growth forest there, and it really uh, created a good backdrop for it. Uh, has that kind of primeval forest look, which is kind of nice, especially for this. So the movie is a post-apocalyptic movie, but pretty much different than most post-apocalyptics that are out there. The gist of the movie is that at some point, uh, in order to deal with an environmental catastrophe that was in progress, they were genetically engineering bacteria to try to help with the situation, and the bacteria got loose and basically wreaked havoc on the earth. And it's got a completely different feel than most post-apocalyptics. Uh, Very interesting vibe to it. A lot of it gets into not as much dealing with surviving technology, of which there doesn't seem to be very little at all, but in fact, trying to create new technology via biohacking. So a very different way of looking at it. This movie starred Raffaella Chapman, plays the lead of Vesper. Eddie Marsan plays her uncle. Rosie McGowan plays, I guess you'd call her a refugee from one of the civilized areas. Explain that in a moment. And Richard Brake plays her father. Kind of an odd role he has. On one, uh, he's a bedbound individual who has, I guess, call it an avatar through a floating uh, kind of droid uh, drone type apparatus. So on one hand, he's a voice actor through most of the movie, and the other acts he's a bedbound individual with very limited uh, ability to interact with people. Pretty much just uh, his eyes in terms of facial expression. Uh, Interesting. So essentially, we have an alien Earth now that's pretty much devoid of normal life. The inhabitants on the outside eke out a living finding useful new species uh, for their biohacked world. There are these bastions of civilization known as citadels where people live and apparently live in some form of modern or ultra modern comfort. But pretty much the movie is from the perspective of the people on the outside. Uh, it's a very rustic feel, almost like a pioneer feel to it. Like this is like a colony on the edge of a vast wilderness. One thing that's nice is even though there's an indicator there of kind of a have not dynamic, which definitely plays into the motivations of people and the background of how things work. It's not at all the typical have not trope. Uh, it's almost entirely from the people on the outside. That's all that you really need to know about uh, that part of the movie. The tech is essentially post-apocalyptic life forms that have been biohacked, and so all the animals we know of the Earth are no longer roaming the Earth. Uh, Most of the plants, especially the edible ones, are gone. And the big deal is the way they get the majority of their food is by essentially growing seeds in greenhouses, and the only seeds are available from the citadels. And the citadels have bioengineered the seeds to be non fertile. So they will germinate, create food, but any of the seeds that come from that food can't be replanted. So you're constantly in a position where you have to be gathering things that are useful for the citadel in order to trade to the citadel for a new batch of seeds and continuing the growth. Um, the biotech really, at its best, gives you only the most rudimentary access to comfort. So it's not, like for instance, the like a typical post-apocalyptic, you might have like a facility that has a big generator on it that allows you to run some of the happy comforts of the former life. Whereas in this case, they have a generator that's almost like a fermentation vat. Presumably bacteria producing methane would be my guess, and it produces only a very limited amount of power, or maybe like a few electric lights, and maybe some tech that's the equivalent of a PC for doing particular types of stuff. So it's rudimentary at best. The main character is bioengineered a plant that can produce something that's akin to a skin graft that'll help heal quickly. As I mentioned, the father is bedbound and apparently on some form of life support. And you can actually see uh, bioengineered life being used in the process of essentially life support for him. Very interesting. And then the avatar that he uses, which is actually down in the picture below there, he can actually see and hear through that and talk through that. So he, even though his body is bedbound, he can act through this thing. And at some point, they actually get inside of it, and essentially it's full of goo. So it's a bioengineered type thing as well. Um, the look of the people, they almost look like modern, kind of like a modern European peasant, whereas the clothing styles are definitely their own thing, but it has kind of this rustic kind of homespun look and a worn look that gives them their own particular look about them, and that works well for the movie. The one Citadel person we deal with has kind of an opulent look, and but the design is interesting. I thought they did a kind of an interesting thing with the costumes, where clearly she comes from a different world, but it's not over the top in any particular way. So it's still our Earth, so it's not a wholly alien look. So it has kind of combination of the remnants of the old world moldering away while people kind of try to hack out their own niche. So you can see that they're utilizing buildings that are slowly starting to fall into decay, and they're trying to keep up and stuff like that. But at the same time, they're trying to create their own tech. And, they're scratching, hanging on by their fingernails, so to speak. Um, because tech is limited, you don't really, because it's not omnipresent, it's only here and there. So you don't really expect to see a lot from it. And what they do in this movie is absolutely fantastic when you realize the budget's 5 million. Now it's 5 million euro, so that's maybe a little bit more in dollars, but not a whole lot. So it sounds like it's a movie budgeted that's probably well under $10 million. I'm really thrilled with the acting in this. Uh, everyone does their roles really well, main characters especially. Uh, Raffaella Chapman, who plays Vesper, I suspect we're going to see her in a lot of things coming up. She was fantastic in this movie. I thought really well done. Uh, Richard Brake, who plays the father, who's depicted in this picture here, uh, does both well as a voice actor and with the limited amount of things he can do in terms of emoting with his eyes. I thought did pretty decent. The uncle is Eddie Marsan, suitably a proper role for kind of a creepy patriarch. And Rosie McEwen has almost an otherworldly look about her that really plays well into this. Uh, there is nothing remotely woke about this. There's no message at all. And they restrain themselves. Even though this movie is as a result of an ecological disaster brought on, that they were trying to alter another ecological disaster, they don't harp on it. So it's really refreshing to see a movie that's bound in ecology that doesn't have the message. So it's really well done, in my opinion, there. Um, the biotech is pretty odd looking stuff. And because of the way the film progresses, there's not a lot of exposition in how things are occurring. Like you're saying, oh, wow, I wonder how on earth she put that together. But they don't really get into it, which is okay. It's not, you don't need to know. The main thing is you can see that these things that she has created and other people have created take many, many steps to get to where they're going. So it clearly explains why there's only a very handful of these various biotech items occurring in the movie itself. This movie is one of those movies where Chekhov's rifle exists. I'm sure if you're not familiar with it, Chekhov's rifle is the idea that if you see a rifle hanging on the wall in the first scene and someone makes a point of mentioning it or picking it up or doing something with it, that rifle should have some kind of importance later on. And so this movie uses that in subtle ways. There are things that go along that may not jump out at you, but come back as important in the end. In fact, the end of the movie, I almost missed the motivation of Vesper. That she was acting on something that we as the audience only hear mentioned twice at the beginning, but it's very important. The movie doesn't have this desperate survival feel that most post-apocalyptics have. Events change that make things desperate, but this is action of the main characters and not as much of the world that they live in. Not to say that the world isn't a major player in how things work, but it's not the sole driver of things. The flow of the movie's good. And again, remember that almost everything you see and hear factors in again at some point. To me, the end seemed a little bit rushed, but it might be because on the first watch, I missed the motivation for Vesper's actions. In hindsight, I realized what was up, and I was able to put it all together, and then so that feeling of being rushed may not be valid. I will definitely be watching this movie again. I see it as a gameable world. I would definitely, I will be tempted to write down everything I see to try to create the rules for a post-apocalyptic biotech world for role-playing games. I would have been happier with a longer runtime. There's certain things going on in the movie I mean, you don't absolutely need to know what's happening, but I would have liked to have seen it spelled out more. But I'm okay with the way it was. But I think that's a good sign of a movie when you watch it and go, wow, that was a good movie. I wouldn't have minded seeing another 30 minutes of exposition or just general play out so I can see more of this world. Because it does seem to be a fairly rich world. So, has anyone seen this movie? Please comment below. Tell me what you thought of it. If you do spoilers, please say you're using spoilers so you don't ruin the movie for somebody else. If I convinced you to watch it, definitely tell me about that once you get done with it. Please smash the like button. If the YouTube algorithm has brought you in here, you're not one of my usual viewers, please consider subscribing. I've got a very huge eclectic content, all kinds of different stuff, not just movie reviews. And if you think there's somebody out there who might find this interesting, please consider sharing it with them. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.